So now we're going to find the 6 trig functions given the point -3, 11. How am I proceeding at this point? I'm looking at as -3 as what variable? X. And what is this? Y. And what's the other variable I have to find? R. So what's the formula? It's x squared plus y squared equals r squared. We have -3 squared plus 11 squared equals r squared. So we have 9 plus 121 equals 130. Now we have r squared, so we have to square root. Now do I put a plus or minus in the front since I'm squaring? No, we're just going to leave it as positive because r is distance, right? And what we know about r is r, and since it's a distance, there is no negative distance, so it has to be positive. So remember what r is graphically. Now -311, what quadrant would that be in? 2. So you have -3, and we're going to, I know it doesn't look like it, but let's say this is 11. So this is quadrant 2. So your answers should match up. What I mean by that is, let's find the sign really quickly. Y over r, right? That's the formula. 11 over, and we have r, we found that to be square root of 130. So we're going to do square root of 130, square root of 130. Now 130 can't be simplified any further, so we're going to have 11 square root of 130 over 130 because you're squaring it. Now does that make sense that it's positive? Remember quadrant 2 sign, so it's all students take calculus. So the dot, your point here, the only thing that should be positive in this quadrant is sine, right? Sine and its reciprocant, cosecant. Now, since we found sine, the next easiest to find would be its reciprocal, cosecant, right? So since sine was y over r, cosecant, we're going to have r over y. So root 130 over 11. Because if we would have used this, now either one is fine to use, but if we would have used this, you have a square root in your denominator, which means you would have extra steps. Now let's do cosine. Cosine is x over r. So x is -3 all over r, which we found was root 130. Now does this make sense that it's a negative? Yeah, because it's in the second quadrant and only sine and cosecant is supposed to be positive here. So if we're going to rationalize like we did before, so we don't have square in the bottom, you have 3 root 130 over 130. Now remember, you had a negative, so don't forget to bring your negative over because cosine is negative in quadrant 2. So let's find secant of theta. It'll be r over x, it's the reciprocal. So you have r is square root of 130 over, remember it's -3. Now you know your answer is going to be negative at this point because it's cosine and secant is always negative in quadrant 2. So this is actually your answer for secant. And of course you could put the negative in front or at the bottom, it doesn't matter. Okay, so what is tangent? What over what? It's y over x, right? So we know y is 11 and x is -3, and that's actually the answer. Now since we found tangent, cotangent is just the reciprocal, so it's x over y, so it's going to be -3 over 11. And now we have found all 6 trig functions given point -3, 11. Now let's do another problem. It says find the other trig functions if tangent of theta is 24 over 7 and sine of theta is greater than 0. So if you know the answer to one trig function, you should already have the answers to all trig functions. What is tangent? Remember, tangent is y over x. So if you're having trouble remembering this y over x stuff, remember SOHCAHTOA. Remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. What we can do is just draw a little right triangle. So there's a little right triangle, so about 90 degrees. So let's create an angle. So then this will be the angle. So opposite of this angle is what? 24. Opposite. So this is the hypotenuse, right? and this is the adjacent. So it's opposite over adjacent. So here we're going to do 7. So 24 over 7. So how are we going to find hypotenuse? So remember is x squared plus y squared equals r squared. So remember that c equals square root 7 squared plus 24 squared. So equals 625. And if you square that in your calculator, you'll get a 25. That's 25. And remember, this is the same like saying x, y, and r. So whatever is easier for you, but a lot of people like the SOHCAHTOA. Now, what's the point of having sine of beta is greater than 0? Now, they're telling us if it's greater than 0, it's just saying that it's positive, right? So any number that's greater than 0 on a number line, anything that's greater is positive. What quadrant are we looking at here? If tangent of beta is 24 over 7, so we know sine is positive. And what else do we know? We also know that tangent is positive, right? So what quadrant could that possibly happen? Remember, all students take calculus. So where would sine and tangent both be positive? Quadrant 1, because this is all, right? What's positive in quadrant 2? It's just sine. And what's positive in quadrant 3? Tangent. So that means sine isn't. So we know if tangent is 24 over 7 is positive, it has to be quadrant 1, right? So they want us to find all other trig functions. So if we have tangent, what's the next easiest one? So cotangent of theta, which is 7 over 24. So do I have to worry about making it positive or negative? No, right? Because it's the same sign as tangent. So the reciprocal is positive because tangent is positive. Now let's try sine beta. 24. And what was the hypotenuse? 25, right? Now is it going to be positive or negative? Remember, we're in quadrant 1. So we know that everything is going to be positive. So we don't even have to worry about it in this problem. So here's sine. So cosecant is going to be 25 over 24. Okay, now let's figure out the last two. So we have cosine. Cosine of theta is 7 over 25. Now, how do I find cosine? Remember, ca, so it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So I got adjacent, which is 7, over my hypotenuse, 25. And again, we know that's positive. And then the last one, the reciprocal of cosine. So we're going to find secant theta is, and just the reciprocal, so it's 25 over 7. And that's the answer.